Nintendo was originally founded as a card company in 1889. Nintendo remained a card company until 1962 when they changed their name to Nintendo Limited Company and began to manufacture games. In 1977 and 1978, Nintendo released a series of home-use video games in Japan, which played a single game and sold 3 million copies total. In 1991, Nintendo developed Donkey Kong, a coin-operated video game which became the hottest-selling arcade machine in the business. While the Donkey Kong arcade machines were a hit, Nintendo created its first home console, the Nintendo Entertainment System, in 1984. This was released 2 years later worldwide and saw a very successful run, creating popular series such as Super Mario Bros., Metroid, The Legend of Zelda, Punch-Out!, and Excite-Bike. 5 years after the launch of the NES, Nintendo released the Game Boy in 1989, which saw massive success with Tetris. Shortly after the Game Boy, Nintendo released the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1990. This launched worldwide several years later with massive success, selling over 46 million units worldwide. This console created sequels for several franchises that found massive success, including The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario Bros. Nintendo went on to create the Nintendo 64 in 1996, whose launch title, Super Mario 64, was considered the greatest game ever by many at the time. In the same year, Nintendo created Pokemon, a series that still remains popular today. Several years after this, in 1998, Nintendo released the Game Boy Color alongside the Game Boy Camera Imprinted. In this same year, Nintendo released The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which was highly acclaimed by reviewers. By 2000, the Nintendo Game Boy became the most popular selling console ever, selling more than 100 million consoles. In 2001, Nintendo launched its next console, the GameCube. It found success with titles such as Luigi's Mansion, Super Smash Bros. Melee, and Super Mario Sunshine. This console was also revolutionary with the release of the wireless Nintendo Wavebird controllers. Nintendo launched the Nintendo 2DS in 2004, which immediately became successful. Today, it is the highest-selling portable gaming console ever with over 154 million sales. The Wii, released in 2006, also saw massive success. It included wireless motion controllers and has sold over 101 million units to date. Following the Wii, Nintendo released the 3DS in 2011. This also sold well at 67 million units to date. Nintendo later released the Wii U in 2012, which didn't sell as well as the Wii, only selling 13.5 million units to date. However, in 2017, Nintendo released the Nintendo Switch, which has sold nearly 5 million units already and has caused Nintendo to have their highest stock value in 9 years.
One of the main affordances of video games is the way in which they are designed. The forking path narrative structure grants the player the ability to determine the trajectory of the game by personally directing the narrative. Moreover, the broad array of video games available to the public almost ensures that all niches are represented and every audience member finds a genre they connect with. Some of the different types include sports games, racing games, fantasy adventure, multiplayer, and first-person shooter. Games like these create a more unique and immersive experience for the gamer by allowing them to participate as an active role in the storytelling. This simulation of action-filled adventures entices users as it enables them to transcend their own personal lives and engage in activities they might not necessarily have access to in reality. However, there are rules of the game stored in its memory. This idea is called the game state, where an initial state is impacted by an input and produces an output. Every possible outcome is pre-programmed, so although the gamer has choices, his or her decisions are limited to the capacities of the game itself. The media effects of playing video games on society are considered to have limited effects on its players. The impacts of being an active gamer are complex and greatly depend on individual and social differences. Each type of game mediates a variety of messages to the controller and provokes a response. The different players involved would make different meanings from the same messages, suggesting that outside experience and culture determines the effects of video games on the participant. Whether or not a violent video game will influence a user to reflect violent behavior depends on the age of the player, how much he or she plays, and other outside influences. Players naturally filter such messages being transmitted selectively. Such selective exposure implies that the effects of video games depend mostly on the type of person playing. However, if the user already shows signs of violence, then such a video game may reinforce and strengthen such unhealthy messages. Moreover, routinely playing evil or violent games could alter and manipulate the consumer's perception of the world. Video games have the capability of inducing mean world syndrome in its users and convincing them that the world is as portrayed in the game. This warping of perspective could lead to unrealistic fears and anxieties in young children.
The social learning theory states that people learn through what they see and imitate this behavior. This proves that the media affects society through limited effects. The emotional responses to video games proves that the social learning theory is accurate when applied to Nintendo video games. When people use copycat behavior, they tend to act how the video game acts. In the case of Nintendo, the Mario games give a sense of high risk, high reward. These games introduce impulsive decision making at a fast paced tempo. Take the example of the mini games in the Mario Party video games. These show that you have to react quickly to win the game and you are placed under high stress. Most of the games are timed and you have to act quickly in order to not get disqualified. When you are exposed to this type of underlying unconscious stress, you will become more agitated and more likely to react strongly if something goes wrong. This type of media theory is under limited effects, which means that there are intervening variables that affect how much this media contributes to our lives and our social values. There are certain control variables in place that show how strongly this video game culture affects us. With Nintendo, there are definitely huge fans of this franchise. They become very invested in these games, and these fans revolve their lives around Nintendo games. Take Pokemon, which has a huge fan base. Although the people who simply play these games for fun do not react as strongly to the video games because they're not as invested. By illuminating that Nintendo has limited effects on how media affects the public, we prove that sometimes this video game company can strongly influence people's lives while only serving as a fun pastime for others. The cultivation theory states that we perceive the world as portrayed in media. A lot of Nintendo games display highly emphasized gender roles. It is always Mario trying to save Peach or Link trying to save Zelda. These displays of gender norms affect how children, usually boys, tend to look at the world. They think that they must be the saviors of women and they have to step up to the challenge every time. Through the history of Nintendo, Mario could not pass the level without first saving Princess Peach. There was always some scene in the storyline where his quest was started because she got captured and he had to go save her. This could be detrimental because it promotes a high level of masculinity in boys. Just being a male does not mean that you have the duty of saving someone else, but these games make it so that is your only drive and purpose of the game. This might be to blame why video games are stereotyped as a male thing and for the majority of gaming history excluded women. There were no girl characters you could choose to be. It was either Mario or Luigi for the early years of Mario games. So the little girls who would have some interest in the video games would either need to assimilate to the male culture of video games by posing as a male character or be shunned out altogether. This displays how the people who play this game perceive the world as is portrayed in the game. It also shows that girls were not able to hold the title of hero. They had to take the position of the person in distress. They were not able to be the person saving anyone. This can cause a decreased confidence in girls and an overstimulation of masculinity in boys. The technological effect states that the type of media and technology one uses shapes society. Nintendo has evolved from a playing card company to one of the biggest digital gaming systems in the world. Throughout its history, it has transformed from a handheld game, like a Game Boy, to a more stationary game, like the Wii or Wii U. By changing what the actual technology is, Nintendo was actually able to shape society. By going from something you were able to carry around with you to something that had to stay in your home, the gaming culture changed from a public atmosphere to a more privatized culture. By doing this, the effect this media had on culture was incredible. Gamers became more seclusive, choosing to stay inside rather than go out to an arcade or play games with friends. The Wii also revolutionized the gaming industry because it was the first game console to involve active participation. Instead of sitting and watching a screen, the players could actively participate in what they were doing, such as Wii bowling, tennis, or etc. The way technology changed again shows how society looked at gaming. Now it was not some waste of time you could be playing outdoors, it brought the action to your living room. This shows that it doesn't matter what the actual game you were playing was, it was only mattered what you played it on.
Nintendo specifically helped shape the gaming industry present today and create a more inclusive global community. The Nintendo president wanted to expand the games market in order to reach women and children more effectively. He licensed the game Tetris and placed it on a handheld Game Boy, enticing women to become active participants. The handheld devices enabled private play, where beginners could learn to become more competent. This new accessibility led to a shift in targeted demographics as an increase in the number of women involved occurred. Furthermore, this transformation in technology and the ways games are easily played gave rise to the modern ubiquitous gaming industry. Nintendo also focused its attention on stimulating a family-centric atmosphere for the gaming world. It actively created less violent and gory games in an attempt to bring families together in a positive way. In fact, even its consoles promoted the idea of family sharing by including multiple controller ports and split-screen capabilities. With its altruistic goals, Nintendo efficiently used the exciting experience of gaming to improve the family sphere as well as the global community by creating an environment open to everyone.
Nintendo's success over the years has had a strong influence on the gaming industry as a whole. Donkey Kong and Super Mario Bros. Have served as inspiration for countless platformer games, with their simple design of moving from one side of the screen to an endpoint on the other side of the screen. In the 80s, the NES helped save the video game industry. At the time, the industry was all over the place, with many people creating low-quality games. The NES included higher quality games and introduced a unique controller. The use of the D-pad made the controller easily usable and more comfortable than anyone had done before. The Nintendo 64 controller included a D-pad and a joystick, which was revolutionary at the time. It combined multiple controller elements and actually worked. Later, in 2001, Nintendo created the wireless Wavebird controllers for the GameCube. At the time, this was huge, as wired controllers were the standard. Soon after, this led to other companies, such as Microsoft and Sony, to follow suit. The Nintendo DS, the spiritual successor to the Game Boy, included a touchscreen. This was new at the time, and the use of a touchscreen for gaming is used by smartphones today. The Nintendo Wii, which launched in 2006, was irregular for its design. The Wii Remote and Nunchuck could be separated, but included all of the buttons that a regular controller included in addition to using motion control. Sony's PlayStation Move controller and Microsoft's Kinect both tried to implement motion controls similar to the Wii. Although Nintendo was not the first to do everything in the gaming industry, their innovations have clearly influenced others.